From Illinois Public Media, this is the 21st Show. I'm Brian Mackey. And today we're going to focus on the Illinois General Assembly. Yesterday, in the early morning hours, members of the House of Representatives passed a spending and taxation plan for the budget year that begins July 1st. In all, the package includes more than $53 billion in discretionary spending and puts in place some $750 million in tax increases on things like sports betting companies, retail stores, and other businesses. A few hours after all that passed, Governor J.B. Pritzker declared victory in a news conference.
We lowered costs for working families. We invested in our children. We secured transformational economic development and job creation opportunities, all while strengthening our state's fiscal health.
But getting there was not entirely smooth sailing. Democrats had to press pause on the normal rules and procedures that govern the House of Representatives in order to get the tax legislation across the finish line with a bare minimum number of votes. But done is done. Joining me now to talk more about the policy and process of the state budget is the Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives, Emmanuel Chris Welch. Mr. Speaker, welcome back to the 21st Show.
Hey, Brian, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
And listeners, as ever, you are invited to join our conversation today at 800-222-9455. We've got the Speaker for less than 15 minutes, so if you have a question, now's the time, 800-222-9455. All right, Mr. Speaker, I do want to talk a little about the process of how the budget legislation was passed, but let's start with policy. What do House Democrats consider your top win in this year's budget?
Well, going into session in January, I wanted to come out in May with another balanced budget, and we certainly did that. This is our sixth balanced budget in a row, the fourth in a row since I've been Speaker, and I'm really proud of that. I mean, we're already seeing headlines this morning about how our budget work is producing results for the state of Illinois. In the pension space, muni debt is paid down. We are really making smart investments that's helping cut costs to families all across the state, and it's being reflected in how the folks that look at Illinois from a financial perspective are receiving it. And I think you're going to see more credit upgrades as a result of the work that we've done this year.
There's been a lot of attention this spring on Governor Pritzker's proposal to eliminate the 1% tax on groceries. That did pass, though, as I understand, it won't go into effect until the year 2026. Talk about why that is, if you think it is, from your perspective, good policy.
I think it's great policy. If you look at a map of the country, not many states have a grocery tax, particularly implemented by the state. And so eliminating the state grocery tax puts more money in everyday people's pockets when they go to the grocery store. And, to me, the financial policy there makes sense, especially when you look at Illinois compared to the states around us, and it's something that we hear at the doors. It's something that we hear at the kitchen table in restaurants. And, Illinois Democrats delivered on that. And I was happy to see that it was done in a very big bipartisan way.
This is something where it's a little complicated the way this tax is actually works, because the state has collected the money, but it actually goes to local governments, and some of them push back on this idea. And during the debate over this, we heard State Representative Brad Halbrook, for example, a Republican from Shelbyville, who pointed out that local governments can reimpose this tax and do so without going to their constituents for a referendum.
There is no excuse for the House of Representatives to be eliminating protections for local taxpayers just so the governor can tout a political victory for his grocery tax.
So how do you respond to that? Is this just passing the blame for a tax from one level of government to another?
Here's the reality. In existing law right now, the state collects a grocery tax all across the entire state uniformly. We eliminated that. We believe that is a regressive tax on taxpayers. Now, we also believe in local control. If locally elected officials want to impose a grocery tax on the people that elect them, that's the decision that they're going to have to make. And so what we did at the state level was we properly eliminated it because it's good policy. Now, folks will have to take that up with their local elected officials if that's being considered in their towns.
One of the other aspects of this budget plan that got a lot of attention includes a 5% pay rise in base pay for lawmakers. It's going to be just over $93,700 per year. Many lawmakers make more than that because there's extra pay for, say, chairing a committee or being in the leadership of the House or Senate. Can you make the case for that to your employers, the people of Illinois, as to why lawmakers deserve a raise this year?
That's a storyline that we hear every year, Brian. And the reality is that it's a cost of living adjustment that courts have already ruled on are constitutionally mandated. These are cost of living adjustments. I don't know any Democrat or Republican who's giving away their cost of living adjustment. And how do you justify it? People all across the state understand what cost of living adjustments are. And the courts have already ruled that waiving them are unconstitutional.
I think I did see one member of the so-called Freedom Caucus saying that he would be donating his 5% increase to some sort of charity or something like that. But you think it's justified as a matter of cost of living, regardless of the optics. Is this, have we passed the point? Go ahead.
It's the law. It's not justified. It's the law. It's the constitutional requirement that we cannot waive it. And courts have already ruled upon that time and time again. And so what we are doing is, honoring what the Constitution and the law requires.
Let's talk about the process side of this. You and the House Democrats attracted a fair amount of attention over the way the tax revenue portion of this plan was passed. You have a supermajority, 78 Democrats. It passed with a bare minimum of 60 votes. That was after 3 separate votes to finally make it happen. I wonder what you are taking away from that experience. What have you learned from that experience as a leader of this chamber?
Well, let me say this. I said it the other day that the House is not boring. We're never boring. It's always a chamber that provides for some interesting debate. And, we've also said that sausage making is not easy. It's never pretty. It's not perfect. And I have also said to our caucus, diversity is the strength of our caucus. Diversity is the strength of our state. We actually look like America, but I've never said that it's easy. And my leadership style calls for folks speaking their mind and being allowed to vote their conscience. And we know that with the diversity of our caucus, there's a diversity of opinions, particularly around that revenue package. However, at the end of the day, 60 Democrats agreed that the bill should pass into law, and that's what happened.
Because you are speaker after somebody who was speaker for literally decades, there is often that comparison made. And Speaker Madigan was at times known in his career as the Velvet Hammer. Can you talk a little bit more about your difference in leadership approach? Because there are people who are going to say, no, Speaker Madigan would have never let that happen. He would have never brought a bill to the floor if he didn't know it could pass. Say more about why you think that's a reasonable thing to do. Because I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that would have ultimately not passed, that would have been a big problem. That's something that you and the governor and the Senate president had all negotiated. It was very carefully orchestrated, I'm imagining. So just talk more about why you think that is the right approach as opposed to making sure all the ducks are, in a row before moving forward with something like that.
First of all, Brian, let me clear up something you said. I have never, in 4 years as speaker now, put something on the board that I didn't know where the votes were. I put things on the board knowing that they're going to pass. And my roll calls were very accurate on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. And where my roll calls were exactly where they landed at the end of the day. Now, my style is very different. I'm a lot more inclusive. I listen to the rank and file. I have a lot of meetings and receive a lot of input. I did that day. And because of that input that I received, we made sure that we structured roll calls. Those were structured roll calls. It was taken into concerns that I heard from our members across our sub-caucuses, and that reflected in the vote. But one thing was for sure was we knew we were returning to Springfield to finish the work, and that we did.
One other aspect of this budget is that it includes money for local projects handpicked by lawmakers. These are known as member initiatives. In this case, though, Republicans say it was just Democratic lawmakers making these choices. We have another piece of tape. This is Representative John Cabello of Machesney Park, who says he and other Republicans were shut out of the process.
Our taxpayers deserve the same treatment of being able to look at projects. But how are we supposed to give them to you if you don't bring us to the table?
So can you speak to that? What is the public policy argument for saying only the constituents of Democrats should be entitled to enjoy the benefits of these projects?
I just think that's partisan rhetoric, Brian, because when you look at this budget, there's significant dollars going to communities all across the state. When we eliminated the grocery tax, we also gave local municipalities some significant wins in terms of revenue. In fact, the Illinois Municipal League supported what we did. That's the advocacy organization that supports municipal governments in Springfield. They supported what we did and the huge wins that local governments have. There are significant wins for every single community in this budget. Community colleges, higher ed institutions, local grants to villages and park districts and libraries. No district was left out across the 102 counties across the state. And I will tell you, I'm Speaker of the House. I'm not Speaker of the Democrats. It would have been derelict of my duties if we put a budget up that didn't reflect dollars going back to every single community across this state. I'm proud of this balanced budget. It's a balanced budget that reflects our priorities, but I can tell you it also sends money back to every single community across this state, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
But specifically with regard to the member initiatives, were Republicans, as we heard on the tape there, were they invited to choose projects, suggest projects?
Well, one thing I've said consistently since I've been Speaker, my door is always open. And a year ago, I asked the Republican leadership if they would put votes on a budget. And I think it's still important that that be the case. I think it's important that Republicans participate in the process, which they have done. But I also think it's important that they put votes on a budget. They stand there and give those speeches every year, but they don't vote for a budget. I haven't seen a vote on a budget in 5 or 6 years from a Republican. And I think it's important that we do some things to get Republicans to a place where they can vote on a budget. I will tell you, I'm going to be reaching out to Leader McCombie here over the summer and maybe some of her other leaders and see what can we do different that will get them to a place where they can put some votes on a budget, because they have to be willing participants when it comes to the budget making, the budget participation, but also the budget voting. And I'm going to be consistent in that as long as I'm the leader of this chamber.
You and I have talked before about rebuilding trust in institutions and how important that is and what a challenge that is right now. And I'm sure, as you know, in Madison County, voters are going to be asked in a referendum whether, I think it's Cook County, should be separated from the rest of Illinois. We talked to a local county board member there who supported this, but basically acknowledged it was all for show. It was more to make a statement than an idea that had any chance of success. But I wonder if, excluding Republicans from member initiatives, for example, Republicans say they were not invited to budget meetings this year, and please correct the record if you disagree with that characterization, but doesn't shutting them out of the process feed into that sort of frustration that we see manifest in these ideas like, somehow separating Illinois into 2 states?
Well, let me say again, Brian, let's clear up this notion that they were cut out of the process. Republicans are a part of the appropriations committees. They have been invited to participate in the appropriations committees, just like Democrats have. Nothing has stopped them from participating in those meetings and bringing ideas to the table. I'm not aware of Republicans bringing anything in terms of member initiatives to the appropriations hearings or my appropriations chairs where they asked that those things be inserted into a budget. They could have brought those ideas and suggestions along, but they didn't. And again, I'm Speaker of the House. My door is always open. A number of Republicans came into my office advocating for issues. They didn't come in asking for member initiatives. I'm open. My ears are open, and I'm going to be always accessible to them.
Just about a minute left in our time together. I do want to ask about some of the other, well, at least one other piece of legislation that did not passed this spring, and that is the Delta 8. This is an unregulated cannabis product. It's being sold over the counter without the protections and regulation of the legal marijuana market here in Illinois. There was legislation aimed at rectifying that. Can you speak to why the House adjourned without voting on that?
Well, first of all, that is an issue that our diverse caucus has different opinions on. I do think it's going to take a little bit more time to get our caucus in a place for it to pass. That's a perfect example of not putting something on a board that doesn't have the votes and didn't have the votes. And so we're going to continue to work on it over the summer and into the fall. And hopefully by the time we get to veto session, that's one of those items that we can get done. This is very similar to how I treated CEJA in my first year as Speaker. It just didn't have the votes in May, but we continued working on it in the summer and the fall, and we got it done in September of 2021. And so, I'm holding out hope that with continued conversations, we can get something done on an important issue in the veto session.
Chris Welch is the Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, thank you for taking the time to be with us today on the 21st Show.
Brian, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
More to come after a short break. This is the 21st Show. Stay with us.